Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. In a major push to revive the areas surrounding our major ports, the Shipping Ministry is crafting a new township policy. This new policy will enable the development of townships near port, and private players will also be invited to bid for developing the real estate, starting with major ports in Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai and Visakhapatnam. Under the Viability Gap Funding Scheme, a mega package of 5,000 crore rupees is also being tabled for the purpose. This initiative aims to encourage the construction of inland vessels, with future plans to extend support to manufacturing of seabound vessels as well, including cruise ships. Joining us at this point is Captain Sanjay Karve, former Navy officer and Director Civil Aviation. We also have Dr. Rs.5000Cr, President, Center for Digital Economy Policy Research, joining us live. Dr. Sharat Kohli, Senior Economist, joins us on the broadcast, as does Gautam Mukherjee, Senior Journalist. Let me begin with you first, Captain Karve. What do you make of this new proposal? Do you believe it's going to be quite a game changer?
Yes, it should be. We have a wonderful coastline, and if you look at it very carefully, there are plenty of places which are naturally designed by nature. The location is such that they're beautiful natural harbors. And if you look at Indian history, most of the ports or most of the cities have come up because of the ports. So this basic concept of the government to develop small ports or small shipping or construction for inland vessels is a very wonderful idea, because in addition to having new vessels coming in, it will generate employment, it will build up new satellite towns, and it will reduce the load which these major cities like Mumbai, Chennai, Goa, Kochi has got, because all these places are today overloaded, and one of the reasons is employment. Once you have these satellite ports coming up, where construction is taking place, overall is coming up, people will start moving into those places, and it will lead to development of these areas also. And if you look at it from economic point of view, today, other than Garden Reach, Goa Shipyard, Masgaon Docks, they are the ones who manufacture vessels. We really don't have any other major company which manufactures inland vessels or green vessels. We need to import them from Korea, South Korea, which is again a huge cost. So it's a wonderful idea, and I just hope that the states involved do not put a spoke, because the Indian history, the Indian political history is such that the moment some wonderful idea comes up, there will be some state government who will say, no, it is detrimental to the interests of my people, and everything goes for a toss. That should not happen. So the government of India should make it very clear to the concerned states that everyone must adhere to what the government of India wants.
Okay. Dr. Rs.5000Cr, come in here on this proposal. What do you make of it? How big of a game changer could it be for India's economy, also for the shipping sector, for the real estate sector, and also for our Make in India policy?
This is something that should have been done earlier. If you recollect, the North Minister, Gadkari ji, had also proposed something similar around JNPT and other ports, but somehow it did not lead to execution. So I think, as my previous panelist also mentioned, it is a no-brainer that we need to have these cities because there is already some density. There is a logistics hub that's happening, which is the shipping itself. And around every logistics hub, it is natural that a city grows up. If a city hasn't grown up, it's because of lacunae in policies. And in fact, if I look at the 5,000 crore VGF that's been given, I think we don't even need the VGF to do the development. As long as we clear up the policy hurdles, we allow land acquisition to happen, we allow development to happen without any hindrance, it will be an economically driven initiative. And needless to say, every aspect that you mentioned, such as Make in India, will get a huge fillip, because each city takes about $30 billion to develop. And that's $30 billion of materials and services that will get consumed to build the city. If you've got 10 such cities coming up, that's $300 billion coming up, which is 10% of our current GDP. And that's humongous amount of investments that will go in. Once these investments go in, the logistics sector also develops very significantly, and therefore from port, the evacuation from port to the hinterland and back becomes much easier, because there is a city to support that entire movement. And therefore, from the point of development, from the point of the economic growth, from the amount of investments that will come in, from the point of Make in India. Building these cities around the ports is something that we should have done long time back. It's great that we are at least initiating it now. It will not be free of challenges. So I don't think it will happen overnight because land acquisition itself is a big issue. If we see what happened with Andhra Pradesh capital city project at Amravati, it has got delayed by 10 years now. And at some point in time, it went through the politicking of that not being the city and multiple other entities becoming a city, and Andhra Pradesh having 3 capital cities instead of 1 capital city, which then endangers the investment that goes in. So as long as we got very solid policy in place and there's no fickleness in policy, there will be huge amount of private capital that will be coming in, and there will be significant amount of growth as long as we clean up all the policy and regulatory issues around setting up these cities.
Right. The start, of course, is going to be Dr. Sharat Kohli from Mumbai, Chennai, Visakhapatnam, Kolkata. But in due course, perhaps it will be expanded to other Tier 2 and Tier 3, potential ports and destinations as well.
Yes, Uday. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists and the dear NewsX viewers. We have about 12 active large ports in the country at this point of time. There are about 205 minor and intermediary kind of ports in the city. Now, a very classic case, Uday, is that when Mumbai became the first commercial city of India, or Kolkata became the destination for East India Company, it was simply because they were ports, because those days trades used to happen only through water. So these cities owe their development, their existence, their prosperity because they are ports. So I think we have a history where the commercial capital of the country emanated from the fact that they were ports. So I think if you ask me, I'll call it as Der Aaye Durust Aaye. As I agree with Dr. Bhattacharya, this should have been done long ago, but never mind, never too late, as they say. And if you look at the economic development, I would like to, emulate this with the airports. So wherever there is an airport which has come, take for example the new Bengaluru airport, take for example the new Hyderabad airport, take for example the new Delhi airport, and now the upcoming Jewar airport, which is about 70-80 kilometers from Delhi. We already see there's a lot of flutter around the place. Here's the list. The real estate has come up. Hotels are coming up. For example, near the Delhi airport, there is an Aero City which has come up. Bengaluru airport is seeing massive real estate development within the periphery of the airport or just around the corner. Same goes for Hyderabad. So I think if we emulate the model of airport, what do people need? When ships arrive, the entire staff of the port, they need a place to stay. The movement of goods needs to be facilitated. The logistics support is required. And people need to stay closer to the place so that they don't have to commute from the port to wherever they live. After all, a port is managed by human beings. It is not simply auto-run on ships. There are people who manage. And it is these people who, when they stay nearer to the port, they propel the development. That's one. Plus, townships come up. So I see the biggest opportunity there, apart from the logistic help, Uday, is the real estate. And when real estate starts picking up, I think there is a multiplier effect which happens as far as the prosperity is concerned. You'll see townships coming up. You'll see entertainment centers coming up. You'll see shopping malls coming up. You will see so many things, schools coming up, hospitals coming up. So it develops into an entire township. I'm glad the central government has allocated these funds. And I would in fact suggest that this should be done and replicated to all the 12 active ports and then gradually move to the intermediate ports. The whole Sagarmala concept was based on this very theme, that we'll develop the ports and from land to water, waterways to land, from water to air. So this interoperability of the movement of goods and people will propel the economic growth to the next level. So I completely support this. And I think this should be done sooner than later. Captain Sanjay raised a very valid point that the state governments, and this might become victim of politics, I really don't think state governments, unless they are anti-development or they are sharply opposed to centre's policy, then of course, because you can't do it without the cooperation of the state government. So unless they are sharply opposed, it's a different story. But any state government who wants a port area to be developed and the areas around that to be developed, because what we've seen normally is that port area is isolated from rest of the mainland. And you drive down a long way to reach the port, and finally when you start seeing the port after some time. But if you see some of the ports in foreign lands, for example, Dubai, there is a place in Dubai called Port Rashid. Now this Port Rashid is located right in the middle of the town. Dubai has got two portions, Bar Dubai and Dera. This is right in the middle. So we've seen some fantastic development happening around that port. Then another interesting development which comes around the port is called the free zones. For example, again, replicating the Dubai model, there's a Jebel Ali free zone for the people who travel to Dubai. They must be knowing. This has also come up near the port. In fact, ports have also led to some very, very elite and luxurious development like the Palm Dubai, which is also not too far from the port. So I think ports should not be construed simply as, goods being loaded and goods being offloaded. The new vision of a port is that port is a destination in itself, and port can be made into a beautiful place like an airport. It has aesthetically, it can look very, very nice, where people would actually like to live around the port. So I think if you replicate the airport model, for me, this has got a very exciting future if you consider from an economic point of view, Uday.
Absolutely. Gautam Mukherjee, your thoughts on this policy, and also this clearly shows that this is a government which believes in, in beginning immediately, in not waiting or wasting any time. It's been barely 2.5 weeks into the third term, and already the Ministry of Shipping is fast-tracking this policy. What do you make of it?
Well, it's a visionary policy, without a doubt. And to add to what the other panelists have already said, I'd like to suggest that these are planned cities and not higgledy-piggledy, any which way, people building whatever they feel like, creating gullies and narrow strips which you can't drive through. It must be done not typically Indian style any which way, but properly planned. The other thing is, in this policy that excited me was the idea of shipbuilding and design and shipbuilding, repair and shipbuilding. We have renewed our relationship with Italy. Italy is very good at all this. Maybe we can collaborate with them and increase the amount of tonnage that Indians put on the sea, both commercially as well as militarily. This is something that will be an entire new industry given a push. We're doing it at the few places we already have, but they're mainly military ships. And though we are making very many more than we used to in the past, I'm talking also of commercial shipping being built in India around these new port townships. So this will be something that, so connectivity, air, road, rail, all this is very important. Plan townships so that your actual logistics can work and it's not a mess, which can happen very easily if it is unregulated. Unlike places like Dubai, which is wide open, I've seen it early in the 60s and 70s when it was just, very, very open. There's a little bit around the creek and that's about it. Even now, when they do something, they have vast open stretches, no population to speak of by Indian standards, no existing anything to get in the way. In our case, all of that will be there, and it's a matter of incorporating people who are there, situations which exist on the ground, so that they benefit from it. In an Ayodhya, where all the local people get very upset because you demolish all their shops, which they've had for ages, and then you say, okay, buy a new one for 25 lakhs, at one go. And they of course, voted the government out. And then the government woke up and said, no, you can pay for it for 30 years, and here is a nice, development that we're making for you to move into now that we've demolished your shop. So, to do this so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing and doing it properly will then give teeth and claw to this wonderful vision. I don't think we could have done these things decades ago because we were a country convinced we were going to be poor and downtrodden and socialist for forever. Now we don't think like that. We are talking of becoming a developed country, and there's a lot of belief in government policies that that's where we are going. And all of this is a piece with that. For that.
Yes. Okay, let me take that back to Captain Karve. Captain Karve, what of course is also going to be very important apart from the townships and the other development that is going to happen around these ports as being proposed is going to be the scope for shipbuilding as well. Possibly cruise ships, other types of ships which all could begin being manufactured in India very close to these ports. As Sharat Kohli there was saying about these aviation hubs coming up around the big airports that are being built. Similarly, can we expect shipbuilding hubs to be also developed, close to these ports and perhaps in the future, build for the world your ships and other, vessels right here in India?
Absolutely. Indian maritime history, if one has a cursory look, we have always been good shipbuilders, whether on the East Coast or West Coast. Unfortunately, from 1900 onwards, for reasons best known to all of us, this particular art was lost. And why it was lost was the Britishers started ensuring that we did not recommend or we did not favor the local skill and the local talent. In fact, the oldest floating ship today, HMS Fudryant, which is there in the United Kingdom, was built in a Mumbai dock about 150 years ago, and it is still afloat. It tells us of the quality of the shipbuilding or the skill set that we had. Now, like the previous panelists have said, the moment you have a port coming in with all the facilities, automatically you will have a satellite city coming in, and shipbuilding will be a part of it. India can definitely make ships for other countries, and we can start off by offering ships to the littoral states who require smaller ships, who really don't require big, huge ships. Though Cochin Shipyard has shown us that they are in a position and they are capable of making ships of large tonnage. But our aim at this point of time should be go for medium-sized ships and talk with the littoral states. Look, this is where I can help you out. This will help us in two things. One, we are going to have employment generated within our country, and also the export market will grow up. Once the nations around know that Indian ships or Indian made ships are sailing around the world, everyone will start looking up at you. Today what happens is, even if you say, look, I can build ships, it is only the Indian Merchant Marine or the Indian Navy or the Indian Coast Guard which is operating Indian built ships, except few odd ships which have been built for some other countries. So it is essential that we start off with building smaller ships or medium-sized ships for the littoral state. But like I said, my concern is politics should not, I repeat, politics should not overshadow this wonderful initiative and idea. Why I'm saying so is we have a government in a couple of states which is not the one at the center. And I wouldn't be surprised that they will generate opposition from within themselves, or they will incite the local population to go against it and say, look, this doesn't help us. Classic example in Maharashtra has been the Jaitapur project. People were in school when there was talk of Jaitapur project, and it is still happening because successive governments have always ensured that for their political gains, the project doesn't go through. So something like that should not happen. And that is what I reiterate, that the government of India must make it very clear that this is a national project. This is going to generate employment all over, and one should not look at it from that angle of what is the state going to gain. The state obviously is going to gain a lot by generating employment. Unfortunately, what happens in our country is Initially, when the setup takes place, you require skilled manpower. The skilled manpower comes from different parts of the country. Let's say hypothetically, you have built a satellite port in state A. So the skilled manpower comes from state B and C in the initial stages. Promptly, the political environment in state A will be projected in such a way that, look, people from state A are not being given jobs. People from outside the state are being brought in, not realizing that you have to develop a skill set. And this requires time. This will only happen when each and every state, coastal state, cooperates and helps the central government in implementing this plan. We have a wonderful coastline and we have a wonderful opportunity to be on the world map, which can manufacture ships and export ships.
Yes, absolutely. And, what further is now needed to build on this policy, to further, these shipbuilding prowess in our country, to further encourage, perhaps India to become a manufacturing hub for various sectors, including this one, Dr. Bhattacharya?
Yeah, taking forward from what Captain Karve was mentioning, clearly we need to, have the vessels being built in India. And at some point in time, we were one of the largest builders of vessels, to the extent that the British ship industry was so threatened that they had to pass two laws, one in 1813 and one in 1814, curtailing the Indian industry and breaking it down and completely shutting it down, because they wanted to support what was then, one could have called as Atmanirbhar Britain. Because the shipbuilders went to the king of Britain and said that, look, we are not able to compete with the Indian ships because they're better, bigger, cheaper, and easier to operate. So we will die. But when your Royal Navy needs us, you won't find us. And therefore, for the purpose of Atmanirbhar Britain, you really need to destroy the Indian shipping industry. And that's really what happened. So after 1813, 50% of business of Surat and Bengal went down. And by 1814, nothing much was left of the shipping industry in India. And therefore, we need to rebuild all of that. Right now, we have less than 1% of the global market share of shipbuilding. And specifically, if you're talking about river ships and coastal shipping, which are not very really big vessels in that sense, those are something where we should be 100% Atmanirbhar and with the current capabilities that we have. Also, given the capability that we have in terms of building the naval warships, which are of humongous size, including the first aircraft carrier that we had built, it should not be a problem for us to build, the regular larger container ships. But also, please do keep in mind that the total port capacity of India is less than 20 million, TEUs, which is 20 million 20-feet containers that we have. Whereas if you look at China, they've got roughly about 80 million units. So if the total demand itself is lower in terms of shipping, then there is a problem in terms of access to market that we have. So what we need to do is build in tandem the ship building capability as well as the demand. And thankfully, because of the new ports coming up, including the Vizag port, the total requirement of ships will also be going up. There should be policies which ensures that there is a easier access to this domestic market that our domestic shipbuilders get. It should not be that we have shipping lines coming up and they buy foreign ships. I think there are policies that needs to be built in tandem to all the initiatives that we are putting together. Having said that, I think one of the other really excellent points that we see in this policy is the fact that the push is on green ships. So ships that are being propelled by green energy, such as green hydrogen, electric, and so on and so forth. So here is a huge, gap that is going to come up as we shift from the current really polluting ships that we have. There will be a demand for having green ships, and not too many countries in the world are really focusing on that requirement. Now, if you look at China, they saw the opportunity of getting into green cars, into electric cars very, very early on. So they passed regulations, subsidies, and so on and so forth by 2007, 2008, which has now made the Chinese EVs a dominant force. Similarly, now that we have woken up to the need for green ships, if you're able to execute this properly, then India will be a dominant player as the world shifts from the current polluting ships to the green ships. So these are important very visionary steps that are being taken. Again, the qualified being that it has to be executed properly.
Yes, the budget's also coming up. Dr. Kohli, another, place, an avenue for the government to announce more such policies, also ensure that the funding for this policy is laid out in the allocation there.
Absolutely, Uday, because apart from in fact, I was coming to that point that while we've discussed all the plus point, the benefits of this whole policy decision and the advantages which will accrue in future, it'll be worthwhile to table the challenges which this whole proposition, has in front. So I would like to highlight very quickly 5-6 points. One, of course, is the funding, which you just said that we need to have allocate funding, enough funding in place, which is adequate to cover most of the ports. As I said, there are about 205 intermediate kind of ports apart from the 12 active ports. But the biggest challenge, if you ask for me, is the 5-6, which is one is the geopolitical challenge, because the problems we are seeing in the ships passing through the Red Sea, and where they have to take a longer route because of the Houthi and the Hezbollah challenges and so. They are being pirated, they are being captured, they are being hit. So I think that remains a challenge, because when you take a longer route, the cost of transportation goes up. So it makes it economically unviable sometimes. If it's a temporary problem, it's fine. But if the problem gets more and more cemented, I think it becomes obstructive. The second challenge I feel is the climate challenge. I think the climate change which is happening, it's causing the sea storms a lot more often. So I think what happens there is that the damages being caused to the ship and to the cargo there also increases, which raises your insurance cost. So that is another challenge, I think, which the shipping industry across the world is facing. And I'm sure as we evolve as a shipping hub, we are also going to encounter that without a doubt. And then the political challenges, as I said, we already discussed that the state governments, in case they have any obstructions or they create any political hurdles in letting the ports go through. Then the next factor is the cost factor, because Indian shipping lines have to stay cost competitive, because we have some of the Chinese shipping lines who are at this point transporting cargo at very, very economical rates. And there have been cases where, the Indian shipping lines have lost the orders to some of the other country shipping lines, China being in the forefront. So that for me is another challenge. Then I think the world economic situation, I think somebody briefly mentioned about it, that is also a challenge, because the demand for international trade as of today, as we stand today, India is exporting about $775 billion of merchandise and services. Let's only talk of merchandise and services, don't go on ships.
Absolutely.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.